Good morning from Cornell University in Ithaca in a beautiful sunny day. On behalf of the Emerging Markets Institute, welcome to the launch of the 8th Emerging Markets Multinationals Report under the title Risks and Realignments. My name is Lourdes Casanova, and I am the director of the Emerging Markets Institute. The report is a major milestone for the Institute, and I am the co-author with Miroux, but the report is more than Anne and myself. It's the result of 1 year of hard work of the EMI research team, the summer interns, and also the Emerging Multinationals Research Network, and of course the collaboration with many other institutions. First, I want to mention OECD Development Center, the MNET, our colleague Lorenzo Pavone and his team. Then IFC, the International Financial Corporation, Momina Jasuddin, Miraj Hussain, who is with us today, and Matt Sal. We are very grateful for this collaboration with these two wonderful institutions. And also the third, I want to mention the collaborators in the Emerging Multinationals Research Network, a group of researchers meeting every month. And we have here with us the former dean of the School of Administration at Universidad de los Andes, Benet Andonova, Juana Garcia, and their team that also contribute with a report. Then we have Yuan Zheng from the University of Barcelona with Paloma Fernandez and the team that have also contributed. Columbia Law School, George Uge, and also member of the Advisory Council, and the Economic Club of Africa Network in New York, Fred Olayele, that is the chairman. And last but not least, the visiting scholar, Marcelo Kawabata, who is also a PhD candidate at the University of Sao Paulo in Brazil, and a visiting scholar this year here in Cornell. And I want to also mention that today is International Women's Day, and my congratulations to co-authors, the women present, the EMI team, and all the women in emerging markets for a wonderful celebration. And then I want to thank, last but not least, Cornell S.C. Johnson College of Business, Charles Field Knight Dean, Andrew Karolyi. Thank you very much for your support, and he's going to give us the introductory remarks. So thank you very much, Andrew. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Lourdes. Hello, everyone. Happy National Women's Day. Congratulations to Doctors Miroux and Casanova. I'm so pleased to be with you all here today, celebrating the launch of the 2023 Emerging Markets Multinationals Report. Risks and realignments. Well, what can you say? 2024 continues to see an escalation of geopolitical tensions around the emerging markets world. We see long-standing regional conflicts rising to the fore in the Middle East, the Taiwan Strait, Ukraine, various parts of sub-Saharan Africa. You see brewing nationalist sentiments are being revealed in the ballot boxes with greater intensity. No part of our globe actually is untouched by these tensions. Research in international business and economics over the last several decades have affirmed the adverse consequences of these heightened geopolitical temperature for global cross-border trade and direct and portfolio capital flows. Bank flows are receding. Trade disputes are flaring up. Global supply chains are being disrupted. And we're seeing a slowdown in the pace of cross-border acquisition deals. Institutional investors are retreating. What we know well is, in all of that, is that the emerging markets feel this as most vulnerable to these reversals. This report that you're going to be showcasing today focuses on how these reversals of globalization are being revealed in some new rethought outbound strategies for large companies within the emerging markets. Authors and co-editors Miroux and Casanova refer to this as a reset moment, a new paradigm. The overarching theme is about the competing pressures from globalization and the diminished opportunities from rising geopolitical tensions. The growing demands of national demands of local governments for these emerging market multinationals. They're homegrown champions, as it were. The arguments are actually clearly laid out in this report. They're all built around the requisite annual stock taking. Now the eighth one, Lourdes, the eighth report, the usual stock taking of emerging market multinationals around the world, the trends and key attributes of success and failure. Those are the staples of the report. There are also excellent contributions in this report from today's panelists who are gathering to share their ideas. And thank you all for being here. I congratulate you all. I congratulate editors Miroux and Casanova for offering us an incredibly thoughtful report. And I wish you a stimulating panel discussion today with lots of really good informed debate and all the views shared therein. Thank you very much. Best wishes.
Thank you very much, Dean Andrew Karolyi, for the nice introductory words. And now we are going to show the slides with the pictures of the report and also the titles of all the chapters. So slide number 1 and 2. So in this year's report, we reflect on the change of mood from optimism to uncertainty. That's the title of the first chapter. So the first chapter reflects on the first report that was launched in 2016 with a picture of the Chinese ship company, COSCO, crossing the Panama Canal, that year was the most important infrastructure project. The enlargement of the Panama Canal was the most important infrastructure project in that year. You had plenty of optimism in the picture, South-South, we were investments, we were all going to win from this growth in emerging markets. Again, pride to be there, to be, again, infrastructure projects. And right now, and please move to slide 2, where you have the 3, sorry, where we have all the cover pictures of all the reports. In 2023, we see geopolitics, as Dean Karolyi mentioned, and challenging the geopolitics are challenging economic orthodoxy. Governments were always present in emerging markets. Now they are present everywhere and in a much more visible way. In the report, we continue to examine billionaire companies, those with more than 1 billion in revenues. And we find, as in previous years, that there are more Chinese companies than in numbers than American companies. And we see also the power of India, that is the second biggest emerging market by number of companies, with 2013. As Dean Karolyi mentioned, international mergers and acquisitions are going down, but are becoming more and more a rich country game. Only big countries and with high GDP per capita are playing in the international arena. And China, that was present among the 10 biggest countries, but international acquisition has gone down. And also has moved from acquiring companies in Europe and US because of trade sanctions and more scrutiny to buying what they buy, less than before, in Asia, so moving to Asia. And it's very important to note as well that emerging markets, because of cost, when they do international investments, they invest much more in greenfield projects, expanding new projects or opening factories over M&A. And I will pass the word to Anne, who will continue with chapters 3 and 4.
Thank you very much, Lourdes. So this year we continued in the report to study emerging markets through the lens of a group of the 20 largest economy plus China. We call it the 20 plus 1. The plus 1 is China because we want to highlight the unique position, if you want, of China that has both developed and emerging market characteristics. As you all know, growth rebounded in emerging market in 2021 and actually remained resilient in 2022 and 2023 in spite of the crisis. We have actually emerging countries with high growth rates like Vietnam and India or Bangladesh. India, Bangladesh, for instance, is 6% growth rate per year. Vietnam, 5%. China, still 5%. But also Brazil and Mexico, 3%. Now, that being said, there are risks, and some of them are really mounting. One of those is, for instance, debt. But there is also currency volatility, a major risk for a number of emerging markets. And also, perhaps most importantly, among mounting geopolitical tension, the fragmentation of the global economy driven by geopolitics. That's what, that's being called geoeconomic fragmentation by the IMF, among others. In that context, and that's actually the topic of the report, as was highlighted by Dean Karolyi and my colleague Lourdes, realignments are taking place. Alliances are reevaluated and new connections are forged. And a few developments, we are going to mention a few of them, are actually interesting signs of changing times. The first one, in 2023, the enlargement of the BRICS with the addition of Ethiopia, Egypt, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates to the original groups. That was Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Second development, the increasing role of the two new development banks that are actually led by emerging economy. The Asian Investment Infrastructure Bank, whose lending is far from negligible, even compared to the World Bank, but also the new development bank, the NDB, the so-called BRICS Bank, that has admitted 3 new members in 2021, Bangladesh, UAE again, and Egypt. The third development, which is also worth really keeping in mind, is the BRI, that has celebrated its 10th anniversary in 2023. True, the BRI has faced and is facing serious criticism, but is changing, getting or trying to get greener, trying to get smaller, less debt loaded. So it's changing, but it's still there. And it's too important a role or a tool of soft power for China to let it go. And fourth, the efforts made by emerging markets to challenge the dollars. There are initiatives to promote trade in local currencies. Not many yet, but there are. There is a proposed launch of a common currency for the BRICS. And perhaps more importantly, as a game changer, fintech and the development of central bank digital currencies. Now, contributors to the report in part 2 have actually delved into more detail into some of these issues. And in this context, I'm going to give the floor or pass the floor to Lorenzo Pavone, who is the Deputy Head of Networks, Partnerships and Gender Division at the EMNet OECD Development. Lorenzo has slides, but I will have a question for him. And Lorenzo, in your opinion, what are the private sector views on ways to mitigate risk and increase investment in emerging markets?
Thank you, Anne. Thank you also, Lourdes, and all our friends at the Emerging Markets Institute for many years of good collaborations together. Before answering your questions, Anne, I wanted to take a step back and with the next slide, show a little bit what is the analysis that we done on the global economy, confirming what was already said. First of all, that global growth has proved resilience in 2023. With lower energy prices and less supply chain pressure, which helped inflation to decline more quickly than expected. However, the situation is not yet very fully positive, and the global economy continues to be confronted with the challenges of inflation and low growth prospects. We see still geopolitical tensions, which were already mentioned. Financial conditions remain still tight, and confidence in general remain quite low. And this has increased risk in general and deteriorated economic sentiment and appetite for investment. So in this context, we asked the group of companies that participate in the Emerging Markets Network, which is a business platform that we have at the Development Center, what do you think are the opportunities in this challenging environment how can companies navigate risk in emerging markets and find opportunities to invest and continue make investments in these parts of the world? And we come up with 6 groups, let's say, of policies that can help companies navigate risk and promote investment. First of all, it's important to scale up sustainable finance. Because this is where capitals will be for companies ready to invest in emerging markets. But there are some barriers, like data inconsistency, lack of rigorous metrics. This is important to focus on the policymakers create the conditions for more sustainable finance. It's also important the points of debts, and I wanted to mention what also Anne said. The OECD just released a global debt report a few days ago, and we calculated that at the end of 2023, the total volume of sovereign and corporate bond debt stood at almost a staggering $100 trillion, similar in size to global GDP. So that shows the size of debts at the moment. Another aspect is promote sustainable value chains. So supply chains are still confronted with a number of challenges, and the tensions in Middle East obviously created again some uncertainty on global trade. But it's important to focus on design and harmonize regulations that can encourage more sustainability consideration in supply chains, so that even suppliers, SMEs working in emerging markets can benefit from sustainable policies. At the same time, also, it's important to focus on regional value chains because of the issues at global level. More and more regional value chains will emerge as important for the economies. It's key that governments focus on making them stronger. Another important element is obviously the green transition. And this is where also more investment opportunities are, because this is where policymakers and governments are focusing to address the issue of climate change and promoting strategies for investment in renewables, but also on making production cycles produce less carbon emissions. Another important ingredient for navigating risk and promoting investment is the use of digital technologies, which are fundamental in the post-COVID world to be able to be competitive in a global economy. And still there are some challenges in emerging markets related to regulatory fragmentation. And it's important also to expand the access and use of new technologies in terms of cost and infrastructure to bring broadband access to remote areas. And it is important also to focus on agriculture and SMEs in terms of digital transformation. The fifth point is about further develop public-private partnerships. It's important that governments, private sector, suppliers, industry, civil societies work together to find solutions, common solutions, to create an environment more conducive for investment that can generate economic and social development. The final point is about the importance of promoting a business that is inclusive and then takes into account gender issues. And today is the Women's Day. It cannot be a better day to talk about these topics, but it's important in particular that investors in emerging markets take a stand in favor of promoting opportunities, equal opportunities for men and women, promote diversity and inclusion policies, which are developing particularly, let's say, in the developed world, but there is still room for improvement in certain parts, certain regions, and particularly emerging markets, and in this sense also help increase access to services and digital tools for the weaker parts of the population, in order to reap the benefits of the new technologies, in order, for example, to promote more entrepreneurship and SME development. So I stop here. I pass the floor back to Anna, and happy to answer future questions at the end.
Thank you very much, Lorenzo. You mentioned technology, and AI is, of course, in everybody's minds these days. And Veneta and her colleagues have worked, actually, their contribution is on the AI risk in Latin America. But we have Veneta Andonova is the former dean of the business school of the University de los Andes in Colombia. We have a question for you, Veneta, building upon your research. How can AI help Latin American development, the good, the bad, and the ugly?
Thank you for this question, Anne. I guess I have a few different points that can help us all understand what might look like the answer to this question, but you will allow me to be modest in saying that I will fail to completely answer it. So the research that I have undertaken here in company with my co-authors, Juana Garcia and Juan Pablo Soto, as well with Cesar Rosales from the Inter-American Development Bank's Innovation Lab, has to do with the behavior of technology capable companies in Latin America and their approach to artificial intelligence. How do they take the opportunities, and where are the ugly aspect, the risks and the big challenges that we as citizens, but also the business people and the investors will likely face in the years to come. So I'll jump directly to the clear answers that we got from our research. And we must say that there are a few sectors of the economy that are especially enthusiastic about the adoption of artificial intelligence. And one of them is actually finance, mentioned by Lorenzo, but there is also a lot of enthusiasm in relation to agriculture, healthcare, education, and the provision of public services. So in this domain, AI is specifically adopted to a higher rate than in other sectors of the economy. And what we see is that the motivations behind the adoption of AI by Latin American companies has to do with competitive pressures, increased customer demand, but is also a result of a shortage of skilled labor, and as well as the relatively accessible cost of adoption of these technologies. So all these actually lead to an increasing enthusiasm for tools such as chatbots, virtual assistants, email automation, social media monitoring. These are among the most common tools related to AI that companies in Latin America are adopting. Now, the most common business models related to AI include software as a service in AI technology consulting. And the value proposition of AI is generally seen in two dimensions. One clear is cost reduction, but also the increased service agility, more better attention to customer needs are also among the key drivers. About the companies who we surveyed in general are very enthusiastic about their investment in AI-related technology, as they intend to spend about 6% of their IT budgets more this year than last year related to AI solutions. Now, where does the ugly and the bad elements come into the picture? Well, while companies are very agile and knowledgeable and jumping on the bandwagon of AI, they certainly report important risks to which they are exposed. One is the feeble regulatory regime and general institutional framework. but they also recognized that on the top of the absence of adequate regulation, they lack internal governance structures that pose real risks in relation to aspects such as bias, errors, and the emergence of harmful AI outcomes, especially in the context of sharp divides and inequality in the access to education, to the economic opportunities of vast shares of the population. Therefore, what we see is a growing bridge between the private sector entrepreneurial approach, basically huge enthusiasm about AI, and the relative weakness and lack of understanding and skills on the public side that can create important social and economic tensions on the top of those that have already existed in emerging economies, particularly in those of Latin America. So back to you, Anne, and I will be happy to address any questions in relation to the ideas I have just shared.
Thank you very much, Veneta. Now I'm turning to Yuan then, who also contributed with colleagues from University de Barcelona to for a chapter on Chinese car industry. Yuan is postdoc at Harvard Business Schools. And for you, I have obviously a question on the Chinese car industry. Now, the development of that industry has been grounded in foreign direct investment and joint ventures. Nevertheless, the electric vehicle industry is dominated nowadays by Chinese domestic companies. How has this been possible, and where are the Western companies? The floor is yours, Yuan.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you for your question. I hope to answer it in the following minutes. So good morning, everyone. Greetings from Barcelona. I'm deeply honored to be part of this webinar alongside prestigious scholars and professionals, and also extend my gratitude to Lourdes and Anne, of course, for leading this wonderful initiative. Today, we embark on a journey through the metamorphosis and to explore the metamorphosis of China's automobile industry. The chapter that I write with my co-authors, Patricia Garcia, Carlos Brasso, and Paloma Fernandez, highlights the role of industrial policies, state intervention, as well as the contribution of foreign manufacturers. The journey begins with a glance at the present. China, the world's largest car manufacturer in 2009, boasting 1/3 of the global output. And however, in the early 1970s, there was a starkly different scenario, because with yearly passenger cars below 1,000 units, the nation's automotive ambition seems distant and unattainable. Even in the early 2000s, China's total car output was very distant with the one from United States, Germany, and Japan. And China's output grew significantly from the global economic setback in 2008-2009. Fast forward to 2022 and even 2024, China's automotive problems shines brighter than ever, with car exports surpassing 3 million units. Next, please. But how and when and also why this evolution has unfolded in just a few decades in one of the most capital and technology-intensive industries of the world, and also in China, is that the consequences of path-dependent historical process of state coordination of long-term strategies in the Chinese car industry, dominated by close synergies between global and local trends. Indeed, the Chinese government played a crucial and pivotal role in nurturing the national automotive industry in China, with strategic investment and policy frameworks shaping its trajectory. The Chinese government facilitated the establishment of early automotive companies during the Maoist era, with a specific emphasis on commercial or industrial vehicles production, but with Soviet aid. And the era of joint ventures began with the onset of economic reforms in the late 1970s, when an influx of foreign manufacturers that eager to access the Chinese market materialized with Chinese foreign joint ventures or production subsidiaries in China. Since then, and for decades, joint ventures became the norm, paving the way for technological transfers and market access. The central government allowed foreign manufacturers to enter the market by establishing production subsidiaries, albeit subject to rigid conditions to create joint ventures, or to produce in China. In other words, since the economic reforms began in China, the government pursued the technology for market strategy. And this period was marked by the launch also for the first and the very specific policy targeting the automotive industry in 1994. And also during this period of economic reforms, independent Chinese car makers emerged from the 1980s as a result of privatization and as an alternative to the existing strategies of producing in partnership with foreign companies. These young automobile companies faced challenges in competing in a highly protected market dominated by large state-owned companies. And these independent car makers, some of them were state-owned, such as Brilliance or Chery, but others were private companies, such as Great Wall Motors, Geely, or BYD. And during the 21st century, next please, century signaled a new era of electrifying transformation. But unlike previous periods, when foreign brands dominated the market share of Chinese market, now domestic or own brand companies like Geely, BYD, NIO, or Xiaoben from Guangzhou spearhead this transformation, preparing China to global leadership in EV production. So the automotive manufacturing patterns of China, those for the United States and Germany, stand in contrast to those of traditional automotive exporting countries like Japan or South Korea. For instance, while China's share of global EV sales is around 60%, and those of the United States and Germany around 10%, Japan and South Korea only hold around 3 or 4%. So notably, China has consistently increased its market share, securing its position as the world's second largest automobile exporter based on EVs, electric vehicles. So a significant portion of these exports, to be precise, 22% are EVs or new energy vehicles. As we navigate through this fascinating history, we witness that China is a nation that not only seeks to continue upgrading modern industry with initiatives like Made in China 2025, but also strives for a greener and more sustainable automotive ecosystem with a focus on electric and smart mobility and green infrastructure. Several programs and regulations at the national and regional levels prove the fact, because the Chinese government has been present on this development path by targeting, for instance, to establish EV charging points around 240,000 units by 2025. So in conclusion, the evolution of China's automobile industry embodies resilience, determination, and long-term strategic vision, which also proves the importance of foreign collaboration that allows long-term learning process from Chinese domestic manufacturers and government's support to the emergence of new and private companies has been very important, specific to the design and production of EVs. So thank you very much for your attention. Now I pass the word to Anne.
Thank you very much, Johan. Now we are going to the African continent, and we will hear Fred Olayele, with the board chairman of the Economic Club of Africa Network in New York. The question for you, Fred, is the following. Well, Nigeria wants to more than double its GDP to $1 trillion by 2030. And the new government has embarked on a series of economic policy reform to increase foreign capital inflows. However, the recent episode of multinational divestment from Nigeria is generating a lot of concern. So for you, in your opinion, and considering its recent economic history, what should policymakers prioritize, in particular in the case of Nigeria? And the floor is yours.
Anne. Thank you very much, Anne. And congratulations to you and Lades and the EMI team. So to your question, given the current state of the global economy, multinational divestment is really a global issue. It's not peculiar to Nigeria. But to put things into perspective, it's very important to understand why foreign companies divest. FDI relocation happens when the objective behind a firm's decision to go global has not been realized. Across many countries, the retreat from globalization and the resurgence of industrial policy, along with the growing dominance of inward-looking policies and geo-economic fragmentation, are key drivers. In the Nigerian case, what you have seen so far is caused by a confluence of factors, including the foreign exchange crisis, high cost of raw materials, insecurity, corruption, and the huge infrastructure deficit, which have driven up the cost of doing business significantly. Also, Nigeria's growth and competitiveness challenges cannot be fully understood without looking at its political economy. So quickly, after inauguration last year, the Policy Advisory Council of the current government unveiled a proposal to grow Nigeria's economy from about $450 billion to $1 trillion by 2030. You would think that more than doubling GDP in about 7 years sounds quite ambitious, given the current state of the economy. But this is not completely impossible. So that sort of sets the context. But in terms of recommendations and way forward, what really should the government do? Given its recent history of economic stagnation and underperformance, I put forward 4 key proposals. And of course, I should quickly mention that these are not collectively exhaustive. The first proposal is fiscal incentives. Policymakers in Nigeria must look at the issue of fiscal incentives critically. Countries, especially those with fiscal challenges, cannot afford to dish out subsidies to domestic and foreign investors indiscriminately, all in the name of fiscal incentives. Nigeria has double taxation agreements already, about 14 of those, which are ratified, and bilateral investment treaties with 31 countries. So policymakers must ensure that the marginal impacts of fiscal incentives are maximized. The second recommendation is value maximization after divestment. Look, as much as foreign divestment is generally not considered a positive development, some experts would argue that as long as multinational exits enhance the activities of indigenous firms and help them to achieve productivity growth, maybe the net outcome may be beneficial. So, in my opinion, since current divestment plans by some of these multinationals still require government approval, I think the authorities in Nigeria should focus not only on the commercial dimensions, but also on the environmental and social aspects across all asset classes. Thirdly, strategic integration into global value chains will be very important. With the return of industrial policy, being strategic about increased integration and participation in global value chain is very critical. And this requires not only openness to trade and investment, but the willingness to facilitate transparent and predictable investment policies. Nigerian diplomatic missions and other permanent representations abroad must leverage these diplomatic assets to support the pursuit of commercial success in industrial sectors where Nigeria has market power. And last but not least is the differential economic performance at the subnational level. The country needs to leverage that. They have 36 states. To ensure the various regions maximize their endowments, economic incentives must become the major driver of fiscal decentralization to harness the innovation economy for increased competitiveness. Nigeria does need a revamped and a fit-for-purpose governance model that explains the differential economic performance of its subnational regions. So, in conclusion, the country needs deep and long-term reforms to build confidence and foster sustainable and growth-friendly fiscal policies. And policymakers must leverage the digital revolution to create value in emerging sectors with high growth opportunities, build strong domestic institutions, and ensure the benefits of economic growth are broadly shared. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll pass it on to Anne. I'll be more than happy to take questions afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fred. And now we are turning to Marcelo Kawabata. Marcelo is a visiting scholar at EMI at Cornell University. Marcelo, by the way, has a slide. We have a question for you. Marcelo, in your contribution to the report, you have examined public services and inclusive growth through e-government initiative. Now, tell us how e-government initiatives benefit emerging markets.
Thank you, Anne. Esteemed Dean Andrew, Director Lourdes, and EMI team and authors, thank you very much for this opportunity. I truly appreciate contributing to this value initiative. And I answered your question with 2 words: innovation and necessity. Digital public services can foster inclusivity and sustainable economic growth, particularly in emerging markets. The COVID-19 pandemic accelerated the adoption of internet-based procedures by government agencies. The movement has democratized the access to information and public services, enabling citizens to interact directly, creating greater participation, transparency, and if these initiatives are aligned with the National Development Strategy, they can contribute to sustainable growth. And how can it be achieved? The digitalization of public services transcends current operations. It's a cultural shift towards citizen-centric transparency, agility, and collaborative approach. eGov functionalities enhance public services and offer significant benefits to private services. Digital public services have the potential to improve inclusivity and stimulate growth. Another eGov implementation effect is the evolving dynamics of data use. It demands increased interoperability and data sharing. Also, advanced countries need substantial public budget allocations to maintain outdated legacy systems, while simultaneously modernizing for emerging needs. Despite budgetary constraints, developed countries can leapfrog directly to the new model. This is the opportunity, minimizing the burden of scarce legacy systems. Each country tailors its eGov initiatives to its societal needs, adapting to historical infrastructure conditions and digital services users levels. In the next slide, the eGov chapter gives some insights through 4 case studies across advanced and emerging markets. I will not detail them in this short session, but you can find it in chapter 10. In summary, you can see in this table the result header, India, Brazil, US, and Japan, and innovative government initiatives dimensions in the vertical. Digital national identification, digital finance, digital taxation, including tax return, citizen assistance, and digital customs, title release study. As an example, in the digital financial dimension, in India, inside the India Stacks integrated approach, unified payment interface, a real-time payment system, streamlines peer-to-peer and peer-to-merchant transactions via smartphone and computers. These efforts promote digital financial inclusion. In Brazil, Pix, Brazil's instant payment system, enables individuals and business to make real-time, unified, secure digital, low-cost transaction nationwide, while UPI has a central switch operated by a non-profit organization. Brazil's central bank operates PIX. Both are centralized, and PIX use an open bank API. Another example, in the digital taxation dimension, the level of tax administration digitalization serves as an indicator of government service digitalization. Brazil's tax administration has been at the forefront of implementing digital income tax returns. Using an app with pre-filled information, compliance pre-checks, and the ability to send information via smartphone has facilitated the process for taxpayers. Similarly, the US IRS has established guidelines for exchanging information with private service companies that assist taxpayers in filing income tax returns. The Inter-American Center of Tax Administration published the Innovation, Digitalization, and Technology Index, which provides insight into the level of digitalization of tax administrations. Brazil ranks high on this index, scoring 0.7 on a scale of 0 to 1, and India and the US score around 0.5 and Japan 0.4. India and Brazil has leveraged technology to overcome infrastructure challenges, lack of human capital, and financial constraints, improving the quality of service provided to the citizens. Going to the end, my concluding remarks, the pivotal role of governments in promoting digital services, particularly in emerging markets. Developing countries can leverage technology to overcome infrastructure challenges and improve social inclusion. Advanced countries have more cautious approach, and privacy concerns emerge as a crucial consideration due to the concentration of data. And robust regulations and solid institutional frameworks are essential. And finally, balancing economic efficiency and social inclusion is vital. Thank you for your attention. I pass the word to Anne.
Thank you very much, Marcelo. Now I'm turning to George. George Juge, who is a lecturer in Columbia at Columbia University Law School and a specialist on debt and financial market. George, your chapter is on the pressing problem of debt. And the question for you is, how can we improve the restructuring of emerging market debt?
Merci Anne, Lourdes et Andrew. The biggest difficulty that we are facing is that debt has become the elephant in the room. And the reason why I'm mentioning that is because if you have heard President Biden yesterday talking for an hour and 3/4, ever mentioning the explosion of the US sovereign debt, then it must mean that I haven't listened carefully. The reality is I've been involved since 1982 in the first Mexican restructuring, and I have been there as a commercial banker, as an investment banker, but also on the academic side. The reality is we haven't found a way to be efficient in the debt restructuring. And I just want to give you one example, and it's the example of Argentina. There's been, at the end of last year, the number 9 debt restructuring of Argentina for an amount of $44.5 billion. Argentina has $400 billion worth of debt. That was, by the way, a restructuring, which means that Argentina only got 4.7 billion of fresh money. But what are the obstacles? Well, we have to recognize the difficulties. But one of the elements that is interesting and where AI will play a role is that artificial intelligence is only as good as your data. And one of the biggest problems we've had in the last few years to create a sort of observatory of all the sovereign debt around the world is that China was not willing to disclose how much it was lending to emerging markets. And after the situation where Russia got paid in full by Venezuela, when the others only got a fraction of the debt, the private lenders have become extremely worried about the fact that the restructuring might not be as efficient. Yet, we know that the IMF is able to impose conditions to its loans. But does the conditionality work? And we have, unfortunately, to see that it works in some cases, but it doesn't work in other cases. And one of the reasons is because of the sovereign part of the countries. You have seen that all over again. Each time the IMF steps in and wants to impose conditionality, you have demonstrations in the street, and the population doesn't like it. So that restructuring has become hugely political because we cannot find a way to really transfer the risk. Fundamentally, we are accumulating the risk in the public sector. Emerging markets who have access to capital markets are few and far between. And having to work in a situation where you have a lack of transparency makes it difficult. Now, the situation has become tougher in the last few couple of years with the interest rate increases. The IMF stepped in an emergency, but the reality is that the cost of the debt of the emerging markets has been doubled in the last 2 years. And that affects its budget, and that affects its ability to serve the country because they have to borrow to pay the interest rates. On top of that, when you try to make a restructuring, there are some private players, as we saw in the case of Argentina, who are pretty much sharks. And we have seen some difficulty even in Europe during the Greek crisis. During the Greek crisis, the hedge funds managed to get paid in full when everybody was losing 75%, and they made a $2 billion profit. So what I'm trying to say here is that we need to recognize and prioritize the unique combination of factors that are affecting emerging markets. That without transparency, back to what was said by Lorenzo earlier on, there is no trust. We cannot trust people who hide the important of the debt. And we know that China to Africa is probably around 3 trillion, but we don't know to whom and how much. The other element that we feel is that the sanction system that has been used in a number of countries have not been sufficiently strong, and the only leverage before was the refusal to pay a tranche before paying the tranche, having some measures taken by the government. The best hope that we have are the principles for stable capital flows and fair debt restructuring, which was updated in 2022 by the Institute of International Finance. In conclusion, my point is that it is probably the most structurally threatening element of financial stability, and it's the one that we least want to talk about. Thank you very much, and I'll pass it on to Anne.
Thank you very much, George. Now I'll give the floor to Miroux Hussain, Financial Services Specialist at IFC World Bank in Washington. Miroux will be our last speaker, and after that we will have a question and answer session. So please, for the audience, so please you can prepare your question and put it in the chat, and we'll be happy to answer it. Now, Miroux, the question for you is the following. Why digital payments are so prevalent in emerging markets?
Thank you, Anne, and thank you, Lourdes. I know it takes a lot to bring this report and webinar together. It's wonderful for IFC to be back at the EMI conference. My name is Miroux Hussein, and I represent IFC along with my colleagues Momina Jazuddin and Matthew Saul, who worked on this report for EMI. At IFC, as an investor in fintechs and digital payment solutions, we look a lot at what drives digital payments and their adoption rates in emerging markets. And there are many factors. Increasing digital connectivity has encouraged the growth of both global and localized payment solutions. And the adoption and ultimate success of these solutions depends on a range of factors, including a country's financial infrastructure, comprising efficient payment systems and accessible banking services, its ICT infrastructure and the resulting access to internet and mobile networks, its government support and payments regulation, and its product market fit that aligns payments instruments with the needs of users. The combination of these individual foundational components vary across countries. And specifically for this report, we looked at the adoption of digital payment schemes in Brazil and India and Kenya through the lens of these drivers. And whether government-led or private sector-led, we are in the midst of a digital payments revolution. As I stated, digital payments drivers are largely centered around financial infrastructure, ICT infrastructure, government support, and product market fit. What exactly does this mean? Financial infrastructure, we're talking about the underlying framework of systems, the institutions, the technologies that enable the functioning of the financial markets within an economy. We're talking about banking and payments, and merchant services, physical networks, which could be bank branches, ATMs, or mobile money agents. Then we look at ICT infrastructure, which is the technology and communication infrastructure that encompasses the hardware, software, networks, and communication protocols that support like information systems within a nation. We're looking at connectivity and broadband access. We're looking at digital ID, authentication, cybersecurity infrastructure, and government support, which is a big one that we looked at in this report, which is kind of increasingly becoming a fulcrum with which digital payments are being driven, and we look at how governments play a pivotal role in ensuring digital transactions and documentation are accepted through commercial codes and banking regulation. And examples of this is whether it's clear guidelines from the government or consumer protection policies or policies on interoperability or infrastructures and so forth. And last but also extremely important is product market fit, and we'll go over that in a minute, which is the extent to which a digital payment service, or any service for that matter, it aligns with the needs of its target market. It means that it meets the customer expectations and solves their problems with a strong use case. Is the solution useful? Is it accepted widely? Can the solution be scaled? Is it adaptable? Now let's look at how that digital payments adoption has been accelerated by those four factors, looking at the markets of India, Brazil, and East Africa, specifically Kenya. In 2009, the Indian government launched Aadhaar, which is a biometric database that has now provided digital identities for its 1.4 billion citizens. Aadhaar identity can be authenticated using documents like ID and birth certificates, and they're stored in the cloud. This authentication has made it easier for many to open a bank account. And the government has then, on top of that, launched the Unified Payments Interface. UPI is an interoperable instant payment system, which allows private sector payments providers to offer services through. And this solution is unique and differs from the closed loop private payment offerings of companies like Alipay in China or PayPal in the US. It's an open loop system that allows a lot more players to enter the space. But again, it's all kind of provided through a government digital infrastructure. And similar to UPI, Brazil's PIX system is open to multiple participants and has been rapidly adopted. In November 2020, Brazil launched PIX as a real-time payment platform developed, managed, and owned by the country's central bank. PIX enables users, whether it's individuals, merchants, companies, and government entities, to send or receive payments via a mobile app or internet or a QR code. And it's also, it also serves as an intermediary for savings accounts, etc. And again, similar to UPI, it was developed as an open loop scheme in which multiple financial services providers can participate. And then we also look at mobile money in East Africa, and mobile money mobile phone has been one of society's most rapidly adopted innovations in modern times, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. And not far behind that is mobile money, a service that allows users to store, send, and receive money using their mobile phones, and usually through a ledger system that's operated by a telecommunications company with a cash balance is held at a bank. The story of the success of mobile money, specifically M-Pesa in Kenya, is a story that we've all heard many times. So what do their adoption curves tell us about what drives their usage? Since its release in April 2016, India's UPI adoption has been rapid, with the total transaction volume rising from 2 million transactions per month in December 2016 to nearly 12 billion transactions in December 2023. Financial institutions continue to onboard onto the UPI platform, from an initial 21 banks to over 500 in 2023. And UPI monthly transaction volume has also steadily risen, increasing to about 6% of GDP. I would look at for Brazil, which it was only launched a few years ago, and in just over 3 years, PIX has become a cornerstone of Brazil's digital payments infrastructure, offering users a swift and secure, accessible means of conducting transactions. PIX processes an average of 156 million transactions per day. After 7 years, the volume is over 12 billion. So we've seen kind of a greater penetration also of smartphones, which enables this kind of activity, specifically in Brazil and also India and Kenya, and this aligns with better connectivity, which can also be a proxy for user comfort with digital technologies, which again suggests the importance of ICT infrastructure and connectivity as an adoption driver. These adoption curves are not taking hold in all digital payment instruments. We've looked at, I know at the EMI conference specifically, we've talked a lot about CBDCs and also cryptocurrencies as a corollary to that, which we have not seen wide adoption for. Nigeria's eNaira CBDC has fallen flat. Bitcoin, which is currently going through a bull run and reached the value of like an all-time high recently. However, after 14 years, its daily volume is still in the hundreds of thousands. It's which may signify that users of Bitcoin are less interested in transactional uses than in it as a speculative investment. So this kind of the fact that a lot of CBDCs have fallen flat, it's clear that digital payments adoption requires a holistic approach. Specifically, as we discussed in our paper, the need for financial and ICT infrastructure, government support, and product market fit are the real drivers of digital payments adoption. And with that, I'll send it back to Anne.
Thank you, Miroux. Actually, I think it's Lourdes who is going to take the floor from now on.
So thank you very much, all presenters, and they stick to time, so we are on time. So thank you all, very interesting. Actually, the first question we have from the audience, from Alok Patwardhan, is regarding technology. And we heard a lot about technology from Lorenzo, from Marcelo, Veneta, and Miroux now. So the question is, and I would request Lorenzo, who was the first one to speak, are emerging markets relying on technology to leapfrog development cycles? And in some ways, actually, as we have heard again from Marcelo, from Veneta, and now from Miroux, emerging markets are dominating in certain areas of digital technology. So why is that? And so Lorenzo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lourdes. Yes, I would say that the digital technologies are an opportunity for emerging markets. We know that, for example, Africa has the world highest number of mobile money accounts. E-commerce use increased a lot in Asia in post-pandemic. In Latin America also, mobile connections expected to reach 80–90% in a few years. However, there are some challenges that are specific for emerging markets that they need to overcome. And first, it's important to make sure that rural areas, remote areas are connected. So it's important to increase connectivity. It's important also to make sure that technologies do not increase disparities between categories of people. So now you have those that are educated, that have access to internet, and then the risk is that those left behind will be even further left behind if digital is not sufficiently, let's say, inclusive. So these are important aspects that specifically relate to emerging markets. So when it comes to, for example, the level of informalities, that is an effect or correlated with poverty levels. So I would say, yes, there are opportunities, but there are also specific challenges related to emerging markets.
Thank you very much, Lorenzo. We have another question related to the automotive industry from Sergio Costa. And actually, it's very much a current question because this is happening as we speak. So Toyota, the Japanese Toyota, and also Stellantis, the joint venture between Fiat and Peugeot, have just announced billionaire investments in Brazil, of course, to counterbalance the investments of Chinese GWM and BYD. So what do we expect from us? We are seeing competition in this sector growing. Yuan, but whoever wants to answer.
Well, I think this is a very interesting and important question. Well, I think this question could be extended to all my colleagues here present here, because I think it's related to many other industries. But however, car industry is recognized as the industry of industry because, well, there are a lot of suppliers and supply chain involved. And from my point of view and through my historical analysis, yes, why not? We can expect similar investment movements or strategies to other industries because it's not only about the car industry. There's much more than it. So, yeah, thank you for your question, Sergio.
And maybe, Veneta, you can add something. You are close by to Brazil.
I actually would like to add on the technology dimension, not so much on the automotive, Lourdes. And I'd like to say that in our part of the world, companies actually operate in an information poor environment, but they have data that they are pretty much hiding from everybody because they don't trust the state. However, this data is also very well used within their own business models. And in terms of the leveraging of this data through AI, I think there are important and very significant local opportunities which foreign companies do not share, because foreigners come and operate under conditions terms of a very different level of access to information than local companies. And I'd like to mention that because it is the emerging markets with their rather imperfect regulatory regimes and their agile and slightly unusual way of dealing with data and even reporting their operations publicly are actually to be watched and observed in terms of how they will use this information advantage with AI. I think there is something to be uncovered by the global north, which is not evident as of today.
Thank you very much, Veneta.
Lourdes, if you want, I would just have to answer, or I don't know if it's an answer to the question from Sergio Costa, but perhaps one way to look at it is to look at the specificity of the automobile industry. I mean, it's already an industry where, especially in Brazil, you already had a very advanced high level of investment first, and foreign manufacturing very much present. Secondly, it's also one industry where advanced economies still had a hedge. They were still leading. There are other industries where we could almost say that advanced economy, that's not that they have given up, but it's a little bit different. So it's a kind of reaction to that competition, which is very sudden and very massive. So to see the other industries, you would, I think, have to find some similarities and areas where advanced economies and producers in advanced economies have already not, I would say, abandoned, but kind of given up share of the markets, then there won't be that kind of reaction that we see now. So the point would be find the industry where you have the similarity, prominence of the industrial country and capabilities already in big emerging market to produce and really compete.
Thank you very much, Anne. There is now a question clearly for George from Eric. What structural reforms are necessary to address the root causes of the debt crisis and promote long-term debt sustainability? That's the 100 trillion question, as Lorenzo said that debt is 100 trillion. So please, George.
Thank you, Lourdes, and thank you for the question. We are talking here about the sovereign debt, 100 trillion, because when we talk about the global debt, it's 350 trillion. The emerging market, the sovereign debt is unfortunately extremely basic and extremely difficult. Basic in a sense that, like everything, when you have a debt, you can increase your revenues or decrease your cost. Now, increase the revenue, and that is a real issue, is a problem because the big corporates don't pay taxes. So it's extremely difficult. And today in the OECD, the main providers of revenues to the governments for 90% are the individuals, not the corporates. So you have to do that on one side. Now, on the cost side, the reduction of the cost is everybody's problem. And I think that it touches, of course, a series of franchises and so on. But fundamentally, what I would like to say here is that it would be great if we could start sitting down and take the problem seriously and not hide it under the carpet or forget or not talk about it and really realize that this is a bombshell.
Thank you very much. Alok is insisting, and I think this question is for Miroux. So the meteoric rise of digital payments. So one could argue that in digital payments, emerging markets are leading with respect to US or Europe. So what are your views and why is that? And maybe also Marcelo can add something.
No, that's a fascinating observation. It's true, and it's largely because emerging markets are kind of handicapped in a different way. I think both the developed markets are handicapped in a certain way and emerging markets are handicapped in a different way, right? And so for emerging markets, you see a lack of traditional banking infrastructure, but you still see high mobile phone penetration. You see like urbanization and migration, which makes the ability to have kind of a very flexible payment system more important. I'd say also in developing markets, you're seeing a lot of government initiatives, and like the ones I pointed out, whether it's like a UPI in India, PIX in Brazil, or Home Money in Africa. It's not that these systems are organically being adopted. There's a strong government push for it. And so I think there's a range of reasons, also like cost convenience, the informal economy, other things that make it why digital payments are growing in emerging markets. But as I said, the developed market is handicapped in providing new innovative financial services because they have a lot of entrenched financial sector players, and the US specifically is reliant on card networks and Visa and MasterCard and banks that already have a system in place that really, I think the US released it's FedNow. It's real time because the US still does not have a widely adopted real-time payment system, but Brazil does now and India does now. So it's just kind of it really just has to do with kind of incumbents and who the incumbents are in each market. But that's great. It's a great point.
Marcelo, do you want to add something?
Yes, I risk to say, Lourdes, thank you, that the question is very good, but there are different scenarios. Yeah, I risk to say that developing countries like Brazil and India, their first objective is financial inclusion. Yeah, and the government has to push this initiative. The technology they've developed, the country, advanced countries have that technology, but they give these services to the private sector. So each bank or group of bank has his solution, like the Vimo in the United States and PayPay in Japan. So it's a different scenario that the developing countries can leapfrog, for having less infrastructure and others favor situations, they can leapfrog this and do to that and pull to the next stage. So that's my view. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcelo. And I believe we don't have much time for many more questions, but the closing questions first to Fred and then to Lorenzo. So the question is about Barbados, but could be about Nigeria, about other emerging markets that sometimes I say emerging markets are like the Sisyphus myth of the Greek methodology. You push the stone, no? The Sisyphus was punished by the gods to push the stone up to the mountain, and then the stone would fall back. So sometimes you feel that, okay, emerging markets are doing well, and all of a sudden, because of debt, because of currency depreciation, this is the case right now in Nigeria. They really find themselves in a situation in which they cannot service the debt at all. So the question from Bevini is, what policies should be implemented to ensure competitiveness for small in countries that find themselves in very difficult situation on a global stage, in the global stage? So he's suggesting maybe trade agreements and others. So what should be just one recommendation to solve this going up the mountain and then all of a sudden starting all over again? So first, Fred, for Nigeria, the currency devaluation right now that Nigeria is experiencing and is wiping out savings and is wiping out also the savings of the country, so the individuals and the countries. Fred?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And I have a take on both. So let me just go quickly and start from Nigeria and then maybe have a quick comment on Barbados. For Nigeria, I mean, on the currency issue, my take is there's really no one-size-fits-all approach, to fixing the problem. But on the whole, apart from addressing major issues around governance infrastructure, I think Nigeria needs a stable and transparent policy regime. Deep and long-term monetary and fiscal policy coordination must be anchored on non-oil resource mobilization and macroprudential management. There's too much emphasis on oil. That needs to change. And second is the real sector, I think for too long has been ignored. Manufacturing and agriculture. Policymakers really need to look for how to prioritize those sectors. If you look at a good example, you find that many Nigerian artists and musicians, they are very active on the global stage. Venture capital investment, VCs, they are pouring into the startup ecosystem. Nigeria needs to find a way to retain the capital, in a market-friendly way, not by capital controls or what have you. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, but it has to be a long-term perspective. And to the question on Barbados, I mean, I see the question says SIDs, that's small island developing states. I've done a lot of work in that area, and the first thing that comes to mind is scale, 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 because it's about remoteness. And if your economy is remote, you've got to find a way to maybe develop agreements or talk to like-minded countries that share many similarities, such that you can aggregate your endowments and production. And then once it's big enough and it's not too fragmented, then investors can come in and operate at scale. And there are examples. You look at the Canary Islands in Spain. It's on the coast, but they leverage a lot of things. You look at Seychelles in the Indian Ocean, that's like an exemplar when it comes to blue finance. They raised the first blue bond. So look at your competitive advantage. What are you good at? Do that well, and then talk and work with like-minded economies to organize yourself into a block. Once you do that, it becomes more efficient for investors. But if it's a tiny piece, the average investor will think twice before jumping on the plane to come to a small island. Let me leave it at that.
Thank you very much. And then, Lorenzo, do you want to add something else?
Yeah, maybe I can say that in a context of quite high uncertainty, political stability, stable regulatory frameworks are key to attract investors in large and small economies alike. Maybe that is an important aspect to take into consideration. Investors want a safe framework to make sure that the investment is protected and build from that. Regional integration certainly is important, and if we're looking at Latin America and the Caribbean, this is a bit a challenging part of the world as far as regional integration is concerned. But I also suggest to focus on building good infrastructure and focus on strategic sectors that create good employment, like green, digital, blue economy. We're looking at Barbados, for example, are important areas for growth.
Okay, and we have a very, very closing central bank digital currency question. So one of the, structural problems of emerging markets is two things. One, on the one hand, is the volatility of the currency. You have to buy in dollars. You have to also pay the debt in dollars and issue debt in dollars. So then the idea, the hope is that the central bank digital currency should be more stable. Second is financial inclusion, because the low bancarization in emerging markets. And then because of this central bank digital currency, as it happens in Nigeria, although, as Miroux said, the eNaira is flat. The adoption of eNaira has not been the success that one could expect. But yes, when you have an e-wallet, you have some funds in the e-wallet and you can use them as you want. And of course, those that are not bancarized are definitely the lower end of the population. And you need to access financial services to be able to grow. And do you want to add something else?
No, on that one, just that, there has been a lot of talk on central bank digital currency over the past few years. And it's, except for China and a smaller economies, especially in the Caribbean, it does not seem it's really taking up yet. That's basically, I think that is a quick question for a number of reasons that actually you have already been mentioned. The only thing in terms of which may be interesting that was hinted at is that the impact it may do on building alternative payment networks to networks that are kind of dominated by either the dollar or big currencies of advanced market. I think that's an interesting question to look at.
You're on mute.
So, sorry, thank you, George. So I think we are coming to the end. We have pushed the webinar from the usual 1 hour format to 90 minutes. So we are very grateful to the audience that has stayed with us for 90 minutes. That means that definitely there is a lot of interest in emerging markets and what is happening over there. So thank you very, very much. Thank you to the eCornell team. We have Marcus, Shane, Chris, Nick, and the whole team that makes this possible. We are very, very grateful. Thank you, of course, the speakers, Lorenzo, Veneta, Miroux, Fred, Marcelo, Joan, and George, for your contributions to the chapters, to the 11 chapters that we are having. And also EMI and I are preparing the 2024 EMI report. We are already thinking of the new subject, definitely artificial intelligence, even when it is not the subject of the day, percolates in all our discussions. So we are considering maybe something around it. And the EMI report will be launched. The draft report is launched in the conference that will be held in Cornell Tech in New York City, November 1st. You are all invited. In the meanwhile, sign up for the EMI's mailing list to hear about the events and publications. We are also launching the pitch competition, the case competition, and everything that goes around the conference. So thank you very much. And as we say in EMI, we encourage dialogue and we continue to build bridges. Again, happy International Women's Day to all the women in the audience, in the team, and all of you who were present. Joan, Veneta, and I. And thank you very much, and looking forward to continuing the discussions on emerging markets. A lot is happening in the world right now, and it's important to learn and to get to know better what is happening beyond the borders. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.